The brass lamp on Dr. Morgan's desk cast long shadows across the wood-panelled walls. Owen sank deeper into the leather chair that seemed to swallow his small frame. The stuffing cracked and worn from years of anxious patience. His chest tightened as he twisted the frayed handkerchief between his fingers. The humidity here is doing him no favours. Dr. Morgan's wire-rimmed glasses caught the lamplight. His lungs need a drier climate to properly heal. Owen's mother gripped the armrest of her chair. But surely with the right medicine. "I've prescribed everything I can, Mrs. Gwynne." The doctor's pen scratched against his notepad. The fog rolls in from the valley each morning, settling in these old stone houses. It's like breathing water. A tickle rose in Owen's throat. He pressed the handkerchief to his mouth, shoulders shaking as he tried to stifle the cough. The effort made his eyes water. Perhaps a stay with relatives. His father leaned forward, weathered hands clasped. Somewhere inland. The cough broke free despite Owen's best efforts. Each spasm felt like thorns in his chest. His mother's hand found his shoulder, rubbing circles on his back as he doubled over. Somewhere with warmer air. Dr. Morgan's voice cut through the fit. And soon, before winter sets in. Owen's breath came in wheezes. The lamp flames blurred through his tears, dancing like strange creatures on the wall. His damp handkerchief lay crumpled in his lap, spots of red visible on the white fabric. "I understand." His father's voice had gone quiet. "We'll make arrangements." The wooden floorboards creaked under Dr. Morgan's feet as he moved around his desk. In the meantime, this should help with the coughing at night. Glass clinked as he handed a dark bottle to Owen's mother. 2 spoonfuls before bed. Owen pressed his ear against the study door, the smooth wood cool against his feverish skin. His father's footsteps traced familiar paths across the floorboards, 12 steps from window to bookshelf, pause, turn, repeat. The rhythm matched the pounding in Owen's head. Through the gap beneath the door, lamplight spilled into the darkened hallway. The footsteps stopped. Paper rustled, followed by the scrape of his father's chair. "Lawrence, you old devil." His father's voice carried through the door. Could it be this simple? Owen eased the door open a crack. His father hunched over the desk, a letter spread before him under the lamp. The paper's edges curled, worn from sea travel. His father's fingers traced the lines of text, pausing halfway down the page. The study air hung thick with pipe smoke and leather-bound books. Owen's chest tightened, but he forced back the urge to cough. His father smoothed his hair, once, twice, 3 times, then straightened in his chair. "Barbados." The word fell from his father's lips like a prayer. "Warm air." The letter trembled in his father's hands. Owen recognized the flowing script, Uncle Lawrence's distinctive penmanship. His father reached for a fresh sheet of paper, dipped his pen in ink. "My dear friend Lawrence," his father muttered as he wrote. "Your timing could not be more providential." Owen's fingers dug into the doorframe. His father's face had transformed, the worried creases smoothing from his brow for the first time since the doctor's visit. Hope blazed in his eyes as his pen flew across the page. A cough bubbled up in Owen's throat. He stumbled back from the door, pressing both hands over his mouth as he fled down the hallway. His bare feet whispered against the carpet, carrying him away before the sound could betray his presence. Owen pressed his nose deeper into his book, the pages barely visible in the fading light by the window. His eyes skimmed the same paragraph for the 10th time, his attention fixed on the conversation across the room. "The trade winds keep the air moving." Captain Lawrence's voice carried the familiar Welsh lilt that always made Owen think of distant shores. None of that damp fog you get here in the valley. The firelight caught the captain's red hair, turning it to burnished copper. Owen snuck another glance over the top of his book. His father sat forward in his chair, elbows on knees, while his mother's fingers worked at her handkerchief. "And the journey itself?" His mother's voice wavered. "In his condition. The Grey Wake is a fine, sturdy vessel, Sarah." The captain's brown eyes met Owen's for a moment, warm with understanding. Fresh sea air does wonders for the constitution. Owen's father cleared his throat. The expense is not worth mentioning between friends. Lawrence waved away the concern. I'll watch over him as if he were my own son. The book trembled in Owen's hands. He'd called the captain uncle since he could remember, trailing after him on the docks whenever his ship made port. Now those familiar dock visits might stretch into months at sea. The captain's boots creaked against the floorboards as he leaned forward. Give the boy's lungs a chance to heal properly in that warm air. Owen's chest tightened, but not from illness this time. Adventure beckoned beyond the horizon. Real adventure, not just the stories in his books. His fingers traced the page edges, imagining salt spray and tropical winds. What do you think, Owen? The captain's voice startled him from his thoughts. Fancy seeing some real pirates? His mother made a small sound of distress, but Owen caught the twinkle in Lawrence's eye. The captain always knew when Owen was listening, no matter how absorbed he pretended to be in his reading. Owen's legs wobbled with each step up the gangplank, his knuckles white against the wooden trunk. The harbour breeze tugged at his coat, carrying the sharp scent of tar and salt. His boots found uncertain purchase on the weathered wood. Captain Lawrence's solid frame blocked out the morning sun at the top of the plank. Steady there, lad. He extended his hand, calloused fingers wrapping around Owen's thin wrist. The trunk bumped against Owen's knee as the captain helped him onto the deck. His gaze swept across unfamiliar faces, weather-beaten men in rough clothes who towered over him like living mountains. The polished brass bell caught the sunlight, momentarily blinding him. Above, seabirds swooped and called, their wings casting fleeting shadows across the wooden planks. Owen's chest tightened. He forced himself to breathe slowly, the way the doctor had shown him. The deck shifted beneath his feet with the gentle harbour swells. Gentlemen! Captain Lawrence's voice cut through the morning air, steady and strong as an anchor chain. This is Owen Gwynne. He'll be joining us to Barbados. The crew's eyes fixed on Owen. He clutched his trunk closer, feeling small and exposed under their scrutiny. A gull screamed overhead, making him jump. Welcome aboard the Grey Wake, young master. A gruff voice broke the silence. The sailors nodded, some touching their caps in greeting before returning to their tasks. The tension in Owen's shoulders eased slightly as the crew dispersed. The brass fittings gleamed like captured sunlight. Owen traced their patterns with his eyes, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. His first real step into adventure, just like in his books, though his trembling legs felt nothing like those of the bold heroes in his stories. Owen followed the towering cook down a narrow companionway, ducking his head to avoid the low beams. His trunk scraped against the wooden walls with each careful step. The cook's broad shoulders filled the passage ahead, blocking most of the light from the deck above. Watch your step here, lad. Sullivan's voice rumbled like distant thunder. These stairs can be treacherous until you get your sea legs. The passageway opened into a dim corridor. Owen's nose filled with the sharp scent of fresh varnish layered over years of salt-soaked wood. Sullivan stopped at a small door, working a brass key into the lock. Here's your berth. The cook pushed the door open. Not much, but it'll serve. Owen stepped inside. The space was barely wider than his trunk, with a narrow cot bolted high on the wall. A sea chest squatted beneath it, its brass fittings dull in the light from the small round window. His fingers traced the smooth wood of the wall as he set his trunk down. The ship's gentle motion made the sunbeam from the porthole dance across the floor. Breakfast at first bell. That's sunrise. Sullivan leaned against the doorframe. Midday meal at noon bell, supper at sunset. No food between times unless the captain says different. He scratched his chin. Keep your space tidy. Sea chest is for your things. Don't leave anything loose. First big wave will send it flying. Owen nodded, carefully arranging his books in the chest. His mother's picture, wrapped in oilcloth, went in last. Ship rules are simple enough. Sullivan's weathered hands gestured as he spoke. Stay clear of the working crew. No wandering at night. Keep out of the galley unless invited. Captain's word is law. He paused. Questions. Owen shook his head, trying to commit each rule to memory. The cook's presence filled the tiny space like a bear in a garden shed. Right then. First bell's at 6 tomorrow. Sullivan's boots creaked on the wooden floor as he turned to leave. Welcome aboard, lad. The hemp ropes slithered across the dock like thick brown snakes coiling at the feet of weather-beaten workers. Owen gripped the ship's rail, the worn wood smooth beneath his palms. His stomach lurched, not from seasickness, but from the weight of what was about to happen. The familiar buildings of his home port looked different now, more distant somehow, even though the ship hadn't moved yet. A heavy footfall sounded behind him. Owen didn't need to turn. He recognized the measured stride of Captain Lawrence. A strong hand settled on his shoulder, warm through the fabric of his coat. Your father would be proud to see you here, the captain said, his voice low enough that only Owen could hear. Owen pulled himself up straighter, fighting the urge to hunch his shoulders against the morning chill. His chest felt tight, but he forced himself to breathe normally. Heroes in books never showed fear, and neither would he. Above them, canvas snapped like thunder as the crew released the sails. The white sheets billowed out, catching the wind with a sound like great wings unfurling. The sudden movement made Owen's grip tighten on the rail. The breeze carried fragments of shouted orders across the deck. Bare feet and boots thumped on wood as sailors rushed to their positions. Owen watched a seabird wheel past, its wings barely moving as it rode the same wind that filled the Greywake's sails. The ship shuddered beneath his feet. At first, the movement was so subtle, Owen thought he might have imagined it. But then came another gentle pull, and another. The gap between ship and dock widened by inches. The morning sun caught the water in between, turning it to liquid gold. Owen's heart hammered against his ribs. The captain's hand remained steady on his shoulder, an anchor against the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Together, they watched the familiar shoreline begin its slow retreat. The morning sun painted the waves in shades of amber and rose. Owen leaned against the ship's rail, his arms no longer trembling from the effort of holding himself up. The salt breeze tugged at his hair, carrying the fresh scent of open water. A school of flying fish burst from a wave, their fins catching the light like polished silver. They skimmed across the water's surface, droplets trailing behind them, like scattered diamonds. Owen tracked their path until they vanished beneath the next swell. Heavy boots approached, the familiar rhythm of Captain Lawrence's stride. The wooden planks creaked beneath his feet as he stopped beside Owen. His weathered hand settled on Owen's shoulder, strong and warm. Your father would hardly recognize you now. Pride colored the captain's voice. Owen stood straighter at the words. The constant ache in his chest had faded over the weeks at sea, replaced by a new strength that surprised him. His reflection in the cabin window showed cheeks flushed with health instead of fever. Another group of flying fish leaped from the waves, their scales flashing in the sunrise. Owen and the captain watched in comfortable silence as the creatures danced across the water, sharing this peaceful moment before the day's duties began. The sea air filled Owen's lungs, clean and sharp. For the first time since boarding the Greywake, he felt truly alive, as if the ocean itself had washed away his weakness. His fingers gripped the rail with newfound confidence, steady against the gentle roll of the ship. Owen's fingers traced the worn canvas, following the path of his needle through the thick fabric. The afternoon sun beat down on his back as he sat cross-legged on the deck, surrounded by coils of rope and patches of sailcloth, his stitches lined up in perfect rows, each one smaller than the last. Mr. Evans crouched beside him, his calloused hand brushing Owen's work. Look at that, neater than Daniel's, and he's been sewing sails since before you were born. Heat rushed to Owen's cheeks at the praise. He tied off the final stitch and bit through the thread with his teeth, just as he'd seen the sailors do. Now then, lad. Evans uncoiled a length of rope. Time for something new. This here's called a bowline, most useful knot you'll ever learn. Owen watched as Evans's hands moved, forming loops and twists in the rope. The second mate's fingers danced through the motions, muscle memory born from years at sea. The rabbit comes out of the hole. Around the tree and back down again, Evans said, his voice low and patient. Now you try. Owen's first attempt twisted into a hopeless tangle. His second came closer. By the third, the knot formed perfectly under his hands. "Quick study. This one," Evans called out to the nearby sailors. "Show him the sheet bend next." Above them on the quarterdeck, Captain Lawrence stood at the rail. Owen caught his eye and the captain nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in that subtle way that meant more than any spoken praise. The afternoon passed in a blur of ropework and canvas. Owen's hands learned the feel of each knot, the way the fibres moved and locked together. The sailors gathered around, each eager to share their knowledge, their rough voices gentle as they guided. His small fingers threw increasingly complex patterns. Owen's fingers traced the delicate lines on the weathered parchment, following the curves of coastlines and the neat compass markings. The chart's edges curled against the polished wood of the captain's desk. His heart pounded. He shouldn't be here, shouldn't be touching these precious documents. But the intricate details had drawn him in like a siren's song. The cabin door creaked. Owen's hand jerked back as if burned. Captain Lawrence filled the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the fading evening light. Owen's throat closed. "I'm sorry, Uncle, Captain, The captain crossed to the desk in 3 long strides. But instead of anger, his eyes held a familiar warmth as he pulled up his chair. The wooden legs scraped against the floor. "That's the Caribbean there." Lawrence's finger landed on a cluster of islands. "See how the depth markers change? Treacherous waters if you don't know where to look." The lantern flame danced, casting golden light across the chart's surface. Owen leaned closer, breathing in the mixed scents of ink and sea salt. "How do you read these numbers?" Owen pointed to a series of markings near a rocky coastline. "Ah, those are fathoms." Lawrence reached for another chart, this one showing familiar Welsh waters. "Here, let me show you how we plot our course." Time melted away like morning fog as Lawrence revealed the secrets hidden in each careful line and notation. He unrolled chart after chart, each one a window into another corner of the world. His stories flowed as naturally as the tide. Tales of storms weathered, ports visited, lessons learned in the unforgiving school of the sea. Owen's shadow merged with the captain's on the cabin wall as they bent over the charts together. The lantern's glow turned the cabin into a warm cocoon, separate from the night beyond the windows. Lawrence's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper as he shared the tricks for navigating by stars, his hand steady on Owen's shoulder. Owen shivered in the pre-dawn chill as he climbed the steps to the quarterdeck. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the mist that clung to the grey wake's rails. His boots made soft thumps against the wooden planks. As he approached Captain Lawrence's familiar figure at the helm, the captain stood motionless, compass cupped in both hands, his eyes fixed on the needle with an intensity Owen had never seen before. Lawrence's fingers traced the brass casing again and again, as if trying to memorize every scratch and dent. Owen's chest tightened. Something felt wrong about the way his uncle kept turning the compass over, checking and rechecking their heading, despite the clear horizon ahead. "Captain," Owen whispered, but Lawrence didn't respond. Heavy footsteps announced Davies's arrival. The first mate carried his morning report, a sheaf of papers clutched in one weathered hand. "Course is holding steady, sir. Crew's ready to begin the day's work. Just need your signature on the—" "I know my own ship." Lawrence's voice cracked like a whip. Owen flinched. The captain's face had twisted into something foreign and harsh, his knuckles white around the compass. Then, just as quickly, the storm passed from his features. Lawrence's shoulders slumped. "My apologies, Mr. Davies." The captain's voice dropped low. "That was uncalled for. Please, show me those papers." Davies handed over the report without comment, but his eyes narrowed. The first mate's gaze flickered between the captain and Owen, who tried to make himself smaller against the rail. Lawrence's hands trembled as he signed the papers. The compass lay forgotten on the deck, where he'd dropped it during his outburst. Owen watched his uncle's unsteady fingers grip the pen, and the cold morning air seemed to grow even colder. Owen's heart hammered as he crouched. Behind the carpenter's workbench in the hold, his fingers traced the edge of an ornate box he'd discovered tucked away beneath coils of rope. The brass clasps gleamed in the dim light from the overhead lantern. A shadow fell across the floor. Owen froze. "Well now, what do we have here?" Alistair Hamilton's broad frame filled the doorway. Owen scrambled backward, nearly knocking over a bucket of tar. The box slipped from his grip and clattered to the deck. I was just poking around where you shouldn't be." Hamilton's thick Scottish brogue cut through the stuffy air. Owen's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories about Hamilton's temper from the other sailors. The carpenter stepped closer, and Owen pressed himself against the rough wooden wall. But instead of anger, a deep chuckle rumbled from Hamilton's chest. Remind me of myself at your age, always getting into mischief, always wanting to know what's in every box and barrel. Owen blinked, unsure how to respond to this unexpected reaction. That there's just my old tool case. Hamilton picked up the box and opened it, revealing an array of well-worn chisels and measuring instruments. Nothing exciting enough to warrant all this sneaking about. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton. I won't touch your things again. See that you don't. But Hamilton's eyes crinkled at the corners. Though if you're that interested in carpentry, you might as well learn to do it proper. Come by tomorrow after your morning duties. I'll show you how to use a plane. Owen's face lit up. Really? Aye, but only if you promise to stay out of my workshop unless invited. Deal? Deal. Owen stuck out his hand, and Hamilton's calloused palm engulfed it in a firm shake. Owen perched on a coil of rope near the mainmast, watching Arthur Evans work. The sailor's fingers danced through the familiar motions of coiling the heavy hemp lines that controlled the mainsail. A simple task, one Owen had seen performed hundreds of times since boarding the Grey Wake. No, no, no! Captain Lawrence's boots thundered across the deck. What kind of sloppy seamanship is this? Evans's hands froze mid-coil. Sir? Lawrence snatched the rope from Evans's grip. His face had turned the colour of a ripe tomato, veins bulging at his temples. Look at these loops. Uneven. Loose. Are you trying to get someone killed? Owen's stomach clenched. This wasn't his uncle's usual measured tone. The captain's words sprayed like musket fire, sharp and brutal. I've been coiling lines for 5 years, Captain. Evans's voice wavered. I know my 5 years of doing it wrong. Lawrence kicked the neat pile of ropes, scattering them across the deck. Start over, all of them, now! The nearby crew members suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. Thomas Davies watched from the quarterdeck, his weathered face carved in stone. Alistair Hamilton paused in his work, carpenter's mallet hanging forgotten at his side. Owen slid behind the mast as Lawrence continued his tirade. I won't have this slipshod work on my ship. You're nothing but a drunk, Evans. A liability. Evans's face drained of colour. His hands shook as he bent to retrieve the scattered ropes. Useless, Lawrence spat, completely useless. The captain's boot heels struck the deck like hammer blows as he stormed toward his cabin. The door slammed with enough force to rattle the nearby lanterns. Silence fell over the ship. Owen peeked around the mast to see Evans still kneeling among the tangled ropes, shoulders slumped. The other sailors kept their distance, exchanging glances heavy with unspoken worry. Thomas Davies cleared his throat and adjusted his course slightly to port. No one spoke. Even the waves seemed muted, as if the sea itself held its breath in the wake of the captain's fury. The oil lamp cast dancing shadows across the captain's charts as Owen traced their position with his finger. The familiar scent of leather-bound logs and salt air filled Lawrence's cabin while they worked through the evening's navigation lesson. Now, to calculate our position using celestial navigation, we first need to measure the angle between. Lawrence's words died in his throat, his eyes fixed on the stern windows behind Owen. Owen turned to follow his gaze but saw only darkness beyond the glass. Uncle David? Lawrence's face had gone slack, his skin ashen in the lamplight. He pressed against the desk, leaning forward to peer through the windows. There, can't you see them? Moving beneath the surface. See what? Owen squinted at the black water. Moonlight rippled across normal waves. Nothing more. Shapes, dark shapes following us. Lawrence's voice dropped to a whisper. They've been there for days now. Watching. Waiting. Owen's spine prickled. He'd never heard his uncle sound like this before. Like a frightened child. I don't see anything, sir, just waves. Lawrence's hand shot out and gripped Owen's shoulder. His fingers dug in painfully, but Owen didn't dare pull away. The captain's eyes were fever bright, darting between Owen's face and the window. You're the only one I can trust, lad. Lawrence's grip tightened further. The only one who understands. The others, they pretend not to see. But you'll watch with me, won't you? You'll help me keep them away. Owen's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to look away from his uncle's desperate stare but couldn't. The friendly, steady captain he knew had vanished, replaced by this trembling stranger with wild eyes. Of course I'll help, Owen managed to say, though his mouth had gone dry. But maybe we should finish the lesson first. Lawrence didn't seem to hear him. He remained frozen, staring out at the empty waves, his hand like an iron vice on Owen's shoulder. Thump, 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 thump. Pause. Owen stared at the wooden beams above his narrow bunk. as Captain Lawrence's footsteps traced irregular patterns across the quarterdeck. The familiar creaks of the grey wake mixed with the captain's restless pacing, creating a discordant rhythm that set Owen's teeth on edge. A murmur of voices drifted through the thin walls. Owen pressed his ear against the rough wood. "Never seen him like this before," David Evans whispered. "Changed course 3 times today for no reason." "Aye, and what about those charts he threw overboard?" Another voice, Arthur's, said they were corrupted. "Good maps those were." "Quiet, both of you." Davis's stern tone cut through the darkness. "Back to your posts." Owen pulled his blanket tighter as the footsteps overhead quickened. Thump, 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 thump. No pause this time. His uncle's boots struck the deck with increasing urgency. Like a man fleeing some unseen pursuer, the ship's bell rang out. 2 sharp clangs that died in the heavy air. Not the usual watch change signal. Owen counted the minutes until the next bell should sound. But silence stretched on. Even the normal calls between crew members had ceased, replaced by whispered conversations that fell silent whenever Lawrence's steps approached. A door slammed above. "Mr. Davies!" Lawrence's voice cracked like a whip. "Why hasn't the bell been struck? Who's responsible for—" A pause. "Never mind. I'll do it myself." 5 irregular clangs shattered the night. Owen flinched at each one, his heart racing as Lawrence's voice drifted down again. "There. That's better. Much better. Now they'll know we're still here. Still watching." Footsteps resumed their frantic dance overhead. Owen pulled his pillow over his head, but he couldn't block out the sound of his uncle's boots or the worried murmurs of the crew, a broken rhythm that spoke of something terribly wrong aboard the Grey Wake. Owen balanced the wooden tray against his hip and knocked on the captain's door. No answer came, just the endless shuffling of boots across wooden planks. His knuckles rapped harder. "Uncle David, I brought your dinner." The pacing stopped. Something glass clinked against the floor and rolled. "Owen!" Lawrence's voice cracked. "That you, boy?" "Yes, sir. Cook sent up fresh bread and—" The door flew open. Stale air hit Owen's face, sweat and spirits and something worse. He fought the urge to step back as Lawrence loomed in the doorway, his red hair wild and uncombed. Come in. Quick now." Lawrence grabbed Owen's arm and yanked him inside, slamming the door. "Can't leave it open too long. They might see." Owen's eyes adjusted to the gloom. Charts and maps lay crumpled across the floor, their edges torn. Lawrence's prized brass sextant lay in pieces near the stern windows. Empty bottles rolled with the ship's motion, glass clicking against wood. "Sir, you haven't eaten since—" "The charts were wrong." Lawrence kicked a wad of paper aside. "All wrong. Showing places that don't exist or shouldn't exist." He seized Owen's shoulders. "You understand, don't you? Had to get rid of them before they led us astray." Owen's stomach churned at the captain's sour breath. Dark circles ringed Lawrence's eyes, which darted constantly between Owen's face and the windows behind him. Maybe some fresh air would help. Owen set the tray on Lawrence's desk, the only clear surface left. "The crew misses you at—" "The crew?" Lawrence barked a harsh laugh. "They're part of it. All of them. Except you." He pressed his face close to Owen's. "You're the only one I can trust. The only one who sees." Owen's hands trembled as he backed toward the door. "I should let you eat, sir, before it gets cold." Lawrence had already turned away, resuming his endless pacing. "Stay vigilant, boy. They're getting closer. I can feel them." Owen slipped out and pressed his back against the closed door, heart hammering. The captain's footsteps continued their restless circuit inside, accompanied by muttered words Owen couldn't, and didn't want to, understand. Rain pelted Owen's face as he followed the crew across the slick deck. Their lanterns swung wildly, casting lurching shadows against the rigging. Thunder cracked overhead. "Daniels!" Tom Davies cupped his hands around his mouth. "Answer if you hear us." David Evans swept his light across the forward deck, found his lantern, smashed to bits by the rail. Owen's boots slipped on the wet planks as he peered over the side. Dark waves crashed against the hull, each swell threatening to drag him overboard. His fingers gripped the railing tighter. He wouldn't just fall. Davies kicked the broken lantern. "Daniels knew these decks better than any of us. The crew split up to search below. Owen headed for the captain's quarters, his chest tight. Lawrence needed to know. But when he pushed open the door, the captain sat calmly at his desk, unbothered by the commotion outside. "Sir, Ethan's missing. The crew is good." Lawrence's lips curled into a smile that made Owen's skin crawl. He beckoned Owen closer with one finger. "Come here, boy. Let me tell you something important." Owen's feet felt frozen to the floor. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the captain's face in harsh white. "See?" Lawrence whispered. "Davies is picking us off one by one." He leaned forward, eyes fever-bright. Daniels probably knew too much. Owen backed away, his throat dry. "I should help with the search." "No." Lawrence's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "Stay here where it's safe, where I can protect you from them." Owen fled into the corridor, his uncle's words chasing him like the storm's thunder. He pressed himself into a dark corner, trying to steady his breathing. Above, the crew's shouts for Daniels grew more desperate as the rain pounded harder. Owen settled into the small chair across from Lawrence's desk, pushing aside scattered papers to make room for their plates. The familiar scent of cook's beef stew filled the cabin. "Remember that time in Bristol?" Owen spooned a chunk of potato onto Lawrence's plate. "When father got his boot stuck in that merchant's cart." Lawrence's shoulders relaxed a fraction, had to saw through the wooden slats to free him. His hand trembled less as he picked up his spoon. "Your father refused to pay for the damage, said it was the merchant's fault for building such a flimsy cart." Owen mimicked his father's gruff voice, earning a ghost of Lawrence's old smile. The captain took a proper bite, then another. Colour crept back into his cheeks as he ate. "How's your strength holding up, lad? The warm weather doing its work?" "Better every day." Owen tore off a piece of bread. "Haven't coughed in weeks." "Good, good." Lawrence's eyes softened. "Your father would be proud. Growing stronger, learning the ways of the sea." They traded stories while they ate. Tales of past voyages, jokes about Owen's first seasick days, memories of home. Lawrence's laugh returned, rusty but genuine. The wild look faded from his eyes. A shadow passed the stern windows. Davies walked past, checking the rigging. Lawrence's spoon clattered to the floor. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. "Did you see that?" His voice cracked. "He's watching us, always watching." "Uncle David, it's just... get away from the windows." Lawrence yanked Owen roughly aside. "He'll see you helping me, then you'll be next, like Daniels. Please, you were feeling better." "Better?" Lawrence pressed his face against the glass, breath fogging the pain. "I see clearer than ever. Davies thinks he's clever, but I know what he's planning." Owen reached for Lawrence's arm. The captain shoved him away, already lost in his paranoid spiral. "Stay back!" Lawrence's eyes blazed with renewed fever. "I need to think, need to plan, before he makes his move." Owen crept along the darkened corridor, following the soft scratching sounds echoing through the ship. His bare feet stuck to the wooden planks, still damp from the evening's mopping. A faint glow spilled from around the corner. Lawrence knelt on the deck, lantern at his feet. His arm moved in sharp, jerky motions as he drew on the floorboards with a stub of white chalk. The symbols sprawled across the wood, curves and angles that made Owen's eyes hurt to look at. "Uncle David?" The chalk squealed against the boards as Lawrence's hand jerked. "Owen, what are you doing up?" "I heard noises." Owen stepped closer, squinting at the strange markings. "What are those?" "Protection." Lawrence resumed drawing, his movements frantic. "Davies won't be able to cross these lines. His influence can't reach us here." Owen's stomach twisted. He grabbed a rag from his pocket and bent to wipe away the nearest symbol. "Sir, please, you need to..." Lawrence's hand clamped around Owen's wrist like an iron shackle. Pain shot up his arm. "Don't touch them!" Lawrence yanked Owen closer, his face contorted. "Never touch them! They're all that's keeping us safe. You're hurting me! Promise me!" Lawrence's grip tightened. "Promise you won't interfere." "I promise!" Owen gasped. Lawrence released him. Owen stumbled back, rubbing his throbbing wrist. The captain had already returned to his work, chalk scratching endlessly as he muttered under his breath. "The angles must be perfect. Perfect, or he'll slip through. Can't let him slip through. Owen fled back to his bunk, Lawrence's whispered ravings following him through the dark corridors. In the morning, he found new symbols everywhere, carved into doorframes, chalked onto walls, etched around windows. Lawrence paced between them, checking and rechecking each mark with feverish intensity, a piece of chalk clutched in his white-knuckled hand. Owen pressed himself against the rough wood of the barrels, heart hammering. The lantern's glow threw twisted shadows across the hold's cramped space. Sweat trickled down his neck despite the evening chill. "He's gone mad as a hatter," Edward's voice cracked. Those symbols everywhere, mumbling about Davies plotting against him. Caught him burning pages from the logbook yesterday. Cook's familiar accent, usually warm with stories and jokes, now carried an edge of fear. Said the words were infected. "What about the boy?" someone whispered. "Owen's been closest to him." "Poor lad's terrified." Cook sighed. Saw the bruises on his wrist where Lawrence grabbed him. Owen rubbed his arm, the purple mark still tender beneath his sleeve. The memory of Lawrence's wild eyes made him shudder. "We're 3 weeks from port." Edward's boots scraped against the boards. "Ship can't wait that long. He'll run us into rocks or worse." "Mutiny's a hanging offence." The youngest sailor's voice trembled. "Better the noose than whatever madness is eating at him." Cook's words fell heavy in the dark. "You saw what he did to Daniels." Owen's breath caught. Daniels, the quiet sailor who disappeared below decks 2 nights ago. "We move tonight." Edward's tone hardened. "Quick and quiet. Lock him in his cabin till we reach port." "And if he resists?" The silence stretched like a taut rope about to snap. "Then God help us all." Owen's fingers dug into the rough wood. These were good men. But the captain was like an uncle to him. The thought of them hurting Lawrence made his stomach turn. Metal clinked against metal. Owen peered through a gap between barrels. Edwards passed something to Cook. The dull gleam of iron shackles. Edwards whispered. "He's taken to pacing the deck at midnight. We'll do it then." Owen slid backward, careful not to disturb the shadows. He had to warn Lawrence. Had to stop this before... A barrel shifted. The wood creaked. What was that? Dawn crept across the deck in pale fingers. Owen's legs wobbled as he climbed from below, his sleepless night weighing heavy. The usual morning bustle was absent. No calls, no footsteps, no. His foot slipped. Dark liquid spread beneath his boot, sticky and metallic. Owen's gaze followed the trail to its source, and the world tilted sideways. Lloyd lay face up, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Blood had painted bizarre patterns around him, like some terrible artist had used the deck as canvas. Those kind eyes that had always crinkled when sharing treats with Owen now stared emptily at the grey sky. Owen's knees buckled. Bile rose in his throat as he crawled backward, unable to look away. Something crunched under his palm, shards of glass and brass. Lloyd's pocket watch. The face was smashed, its hands torn free. Owen remembered Lloyd showing it to him just days ago, pride glowing as he described how his mother had saved for years to buy it. She said a proper sailor needs a proper timepiece. Lloyd had grinned, letting Owen hold it carefully. Keeps me punctual, keeps her close. Now it lay destroyed beside its owner's cooling body. Owen's chest constricted, his vision blurred. He needed to run, to scream, to... Beautiful, isn't it? Captain Lawrence stood at the helm, watching the sunrise. His coat was dark with stains. "The patterns speak, Owen. They tell us who's loyal." Lawrence's voice carried the same warm tone he'd used when teaching Owen to navigate by stars. Poor Lloyd couldn't see them, couldn't understand. Owen's heart thundered against his ribs. Lawrence turned, smiled. That familiar, gentle smile now twisted wrong. "But you understand, don't you, my boy? You've always been clever." Blood dripped from Lawrence's sleeve, marking each step as he descended toward Owen. Owen lay flat on his stomach in the narrow crawl space above the crew's quarters, boards rough against his chest. Sweat pooled beneath his collar despite the evening chill. Through a gap between planks, lamplight spilled across familiar faces, turned strange with fear and determination. Edward stood in the centre, his shadow huge against the bulkhead. The worn leather bag from his bunk creaked as he opened it. Not much of an arsenal. Edward's hands shook as he withdrew a cleaver from the galley. The blade caught the light, clean and sharp. But it'll have to do. The men formed a circle. Owen recognised Cook's weathered face, Arthur the carpenter, David Evans who taught him to tie knots. Their eyes fixed on Edward's bag as he passed out weapons one by one. Cook received the meat cleaver with a grim nod. Arthur gripped a belaying pin, testing its weight. David's fingers trembled around the handle of a filleting knife. And this! Edwards withdrew something wrapped in oilcloth. The fabric fell away to reveal a pistol, its brass fittings dull in the lantern light. One shot, make it count. The men exchanged glances. No one reached for it. I'll take it. Davies stepped forward, jaw set. Known the captain longest. Should be me that ends it, if it comes to that. Edwards pressed the pistol into Davies' palm. God forgive us. The men formed a tight circle, hands clasped hands, rough with calluses, slick with sweat. Owen watched Arthur cross himself, lips moving in silent prayer. Cook squeezed the young sailor's shoulder. For Lloyd, Edwards whispered. For Daniels. For Lloyd, the men echoed. For Daniels. Their voices carried the weight of a funeral prayer. Owen pressed his fist against his mouth, holding back a sob. These were good men, preparing to kill another good man, or die trying. The lamplight caught their faces one last time as they gripped their makeshift weapons. Brothers in arms, saying goodbye without words. Owen huddled in his narrow bunk, the rough wool blanket pulled tight around his shoulders. His mother's rosary beads dug into his palm. Smooth glass, warmed by desperate fingers. The wooden walls creaked, marking each footstep above like the tick of a terrible clock. Left, right, left, right. The captain's measured stride, same as always. Owen squeezed his eyes shut. Those steps belonged to the man who'd taught him to plot courses through stars, who'd held him during storms when seasickness struck. Different steps now, multiple sets, trying to move quiet and failing. The crew. Owen's fingers found the next bead. Cook who'd snuck him extra portions. Evans who'd shown him sailor's knots. Davies who'd made him laugh with terrible jokes. The beads clicked together. His mother's voice echoed in memory. Prayer guides us when the path grows dark. But which path? Tell Lawrence and save him from ambush. The uncle figure who'd protected him now changed into something Owen couldn't recognize. The man whose coat dripped red, whose gentle smile had twisted wrong. Or stay silent. Let the crew stop Lawrence before he hurt anyone else. Before Lloyd's fate became everyone's fate. Metal scraped above, weapons being drawn. Owen's throat closed around a sob. Our Father, who art in heaven. The words caught like fishbones. More footsteps. The crew spreading out, surrounding their target. Owen pressed the rosary to his forehead. Lawrence had killed Lloyd, had done something terrible to Daniels. Yet Owen's heart screamed to run upstairs, to warn him. Hallowed be thy name. The steps halted. Silence stretched thick as tar. Thy kingdom come. A muffled voice, Lawrence calling a greeting. Boots scuffing wood. The quiet before a storm breaks. Owen buried his face in the blanket, shoulders shaking. The decision to act or stay hidden pressed down like waves trying to drown him. His mother's beads tangled between white-knuckled fingers as he prayed for guidance that wouldn't come. Thunder cracked overhead as Owen crouched behind a water barrel, his hands pressed against rain-slick wood. Lightning split the sky, burning the scene into his eyes. Davies at the cabin door, Edwards flanking left, Cook to the right. The rest of the crew spread in a half circle, weapons glinting in the dark. 2 flashes, deafening cracks. Davies stumbled backward, a red flower blooming on his chest. His pistol clattered to the deck unfired. Cook lunged forward with the cleaver, but Lawrence's third shot took him in the throat. Traitors! Lawrence's voice carried over wind and thunder. His face appeared in the doorway, twisted into something Owen didn't recognize. You'll all pay for your treachery! Evans and Arthur rushed together. Lawrence's fourth shot caught Arthur in the stomach. He folded like a puppet with cut strings. Evans made it close. There was a crash, a struggle. Then Evans flew backwards, over the rail, and into the churning sea. God help us! Edwards tried to retreat, but Lawrence's arm shot out, grabbing his collar. They grappled at the rail. A wave crashed over the deck. When it receded, Edwards was gone. Uncle David, stop! Owen shouted in a panic. His voice was lost in the storm. A sharp cry drew Owen's attention. Hamilton stood by the mast, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, caught by a stray shot while trying to stay clear of the fight. Lawrence stormed forward, pistols raised. Rain plastered his red hair to his skull. His eyes were fever-bright, searching the shadows. 3 bodies sprawled across the deck, their blood mixing with rain and seawater. 2 more men lost to the waves. Owen pressed himself smaller behind the barrel. This wasn't his uncle anymore. This wasn't the man who taught him to read stars and weather. This was something else, something that had worn away the good man like waves eroding a cliff, leaving only sharp edges and darkness behind. Owen's bare feet made no sound on the wooden steps as he descended into the hold. Moonlight filtered through the hatch above, casting long shadows between the stacked crates. He counted his steps, 15 across, 7 down, past the barrel of salted fish. A scratch of movement came from behind the false wall of crates he'd built. Owen tapped twice, paused, then once more, their signal. He slipped through the narrow gap he'd created, careful not to disturb the carefully arranged boxes. Brought you water. Owen passed a flask through the darkness. And some hardtack. Good lad. Alistair's voice was barely a whisper. Cloth rustled as he took the offerings. Any changes up top? He's walking the quarterdeck now. Won't come below for at least an hour. Owen settled cross-legged on the planks. Your shoulder. Better. Still hurts, but the bleeding stopped. A rat scurried somewhere in the darkness. Owen pulled his knees to his chest, trying to make himself smaller. I don't understand what happened to him. Listen to me, boy. Alistair's hand found Owen's arm. The captain. He's not himself anymore. You can't trust him, no matter what he says, no matter how normal he might seem sometimes. But maybe if I talk to him. No. Alistair's grip tightened. Promise me you won't try. Just keep bringing supplies when you can. Stay quiet, stay small, and don't draw his attention. Heavy footsteps creaked overhead. Owen held his breath until they passed. I should go. He stood, brushing off his trousers. I'll come back tomorrow night after he takes his evening meal. Be careful, lad. Watch his patterns, but don't let him catch you watching. And Owen? Alistair's voice stopped him at the gap. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you run. Don't hesitate. Don't try to help. Just run. Owen's spoon clinked against the china bowl as he forced down another mouthful of fish stew. Across the table, Lawrence charted their course on a weathered map, his fingers leaving greasy smudges on the parchment. The wind's shifting south by southeast. Lawrence drew a line with his compass. We'll make good time if it holds. His hand trembled, sending the compass points skittering across the paper. More stew? Lawrence lifted the pot. No thank you, Uncle. The title stuck in Owen's throat like a fishbone. He stared at his bowl, willing his stomach to settle. You need to keep up your strength. Lawrence's spoon scraped against his own bowl. Can't have you getting sick again. Your father would never forgive me. Owen nodded, watching Lawrence's hands. They shook worse when he was tired, a constant tremor that made the spoon rattle against his teeth. Sometimes he would catch himself, set everything down, and grip the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. Tell me about the stars we saw last night. Lawrence's voice was casual, almost normal. The ones I taught you to read. Polaris. Owen recited, fighting back tears. And Cassiopeia. Good lad. Lawrence smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They darted constantly now, scanning shadows that weren't there. Navigation's in your blood, like father, like son. A chunk of fish stuck in Owen's throat. He reached for his water, trying not to remember how Evans had screamed as he went over the rail. Lawrence kept talking, plotting their course as if he hadn't shot 3 men dead, as if 2 more weren't feeding the fishes, as if Alistair wasn't hiding below, nursing a bullet wound in the darkness. Owen's heart stopped as boots scraped on the ladder above. He'd barely passed the water skin to Alistair when Lawrence's shadow fell across the hold's entrance. "Uncle David!" His voice cracked. Behind the false wall of crates, cloth rustled. Alistair going still. "Taking inventory." Lawrence descended, each step deliberate. His eyes swept the darkness. "Thought I heard voices. Just me, talking to myself." Owen edged away from Alistair's hiding spot. I was supposed to check the saltfish, for dinner." Lawrence moved closer, running his hand along the crates. "Funny. Could have sworn." Owen's shoulder hit a barrel. Without thinking, he let himself stumble, catching the rim. The barrel tipped, spilling salted fish across the planks. Brine splashed his legs, the stench immediate and overwhelming. "Blast!" Lawrence recoiled, pressing a sleeve to his nose. "Clean this up before it seeps into the wood." "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." Owen grabbed a fish, making a show of slipping on the wet boards. "Leave it." Lawrence backed toward the ladder, gagging. "Get some rags from above first. And lime. All the lime we have." Owen waited until the captain's footsteps faded. He sagged against the nearest crate, legs shaking. That was too close. Alistair's whisper barely carried through the wood. "I'll come back after dark." Owen started gathering fish, deliberately making noise in case Lawrence lingered above. Later, he felt eyes on him. Lawrence stood at the wheel, staring with an expression Owen couldn't read. Not anger, not his usual paranoia. Something calculating. Owen dropped his gaze to the potatoes he was peeling, but the weight of Lawrence's stare remained. His hands grew clumsy with nerves. When he finally dared another glance, Lawrence's lips had curved into a slight smile. The knife slipped, nicking Owen's thumb. He sucked in a breath, but the pain was nothing compared to the ice forming in his gut. That smile, it wasn't the warm one he remembered from their stargazing lessons. This was different, knowing. Owen's fingers brushed against something solid beneath the stack of charts. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled out a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth from handling. The oil lamp flickered, making the shadows leap across the cabin walls. He glanced at the door. Lawrence's heavy boots paced the deck above, a steady rhythm that had become as familiar as it was terrifying. The captain wouldn't come down for another hour. Not until the moon cleared the horizon for his nightly calculations. The journal's spine crackled as Owen opened it. Lawrence's precise handwriting filled the early pages. Cargo manifests, weather observations, crew notes, normal things, safe things. But as Owen turned the pages, the writing changed. The neat lines grew jagged, words crammed together without spaces. Entire passages were crossed out with violent strokes that tore through the paper. A splash of red caught his eye. Owen squinted in the dim light. Not red, rust brown. Blood. It stained the corner of several pages, along with dark smudges that looked like fingerprints. "They watch me through the portholes." The words jumped off the page. Black eyes in the night. Davies saw them too. Said they've been following us since Barbados. He can't be trusted. Owen's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the journal. Davies, the first to die. They'd found him face down in the galley, a knife in his back. Lawrence had blamed pirates, but there'd been no sign of intruders. The next entry was dated 3 days later. "The crew conspires. I hear them whispering. Owen is the only one I can trust. The boy has his father's honest eyes. But the others, they're not human anymore. Not since that night in port. The thing that came aboard." A floorboard creaked overhead. The pacing had stopped. Owen froze, the journal heavy in his hands. Lawrence's boots scraped against wood, moving toward the cabin stairs. Owen flipped through the pages with trembling fingers. The neat columns of numbers and weather observations from their departure gave way to something else entirely. His uncle's familiar handwriting deteriorated into desperate scratches across the paper. Fourth bell. Water temperature dropped 10 degrees. The wake speaks now. They follow in our shadow. The next entry bore yesterday's date. The paper crinkled and warped as if wet. Deep ones. Ancient. Vast. They sing to me through the hull. The depths have teeth, and they hunger for warm flesh. Owen traced his finger over the words. The ink had bled through multiple pages where Lawrence pressed too hard. Entire sections were crossed out with savage strokes, leaving only fragments visible. Scales in moonlight. Watching from the stern. Crew infected by their song. The most recent entry spanned 3 pages, the words spiraling around the margins in a dizzying pattern. The deep ones showed me truth. We are insects to them. Crawling on their realm, they rise. They rise. They rise. Owen must be protected. The boy still has light in him. The others are lost, their eyes gone black with the deep one's poison. I see them now writhing beneath their skin. Must save Owen. Must save Owen. Must save... A drop of water struck the page. Owen looked up. The ceiling beams wept moisture, dark stains spreading across the wood. The lamp sputtered, casting wild shadows. From above came the scrape of Lawrence's boots, slower now, deliberate. Moving toward the stairs, Owen's fingers brushed something tucked between the final pages. A folded piece of paper covered in intricate drawings. Geometric patterns spiraled outward from a central point, forming shapes that hurt his eyes to look at. In the margins, Lawrence had written a single line. They showed me their city. Owen shoved the journal back beneath the charts, his hands trembling. Through the porthole's warped glass, Lawrence's figure cut back and forth across the quarterdeck. The captain's red hair blazed like copper in the setting sun, standing up in wild tufts where he'd been running his fingers through it. The uniform that Lawrence had kept pristine now hung loose on his frame. Dark stains marked the sleeves, ink, blood, or something worse. He stopped at the stern rail, shoulders hunched as he leaned over the water. Owen pressed closer to the glass. Lawrence's lips moved, forming words lost to the wind and waves. The captain's fingers drummed against the rail in an uneven rhythm. 3 taps, pause. 5 taps, pause. 8 taps. Lawrence's head snapped up. His gaze locked onto the porthole with frightening intensity. Owen ducked below the window frame, heart pounding. The floorboards creaked overhead as Lawrence moved closer to the cabin side. Owen! The captain's voice carried through the glass. Are you watching, boy? Owen held his breath. A shadow fell across the porthole. I see things in the wake now. Beautiful things. Terrible things. Come up and I'll show you. You'll understand then, like I do. The shadow lingered. Owen pressed himself flat against the wall, willing himself to become part of the wood grain. After what felt like hours, Lawrence's footsteps retreated. Owen risked another glance through the porthole. Lawrence had returned to his pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. His hands moved as he walked, gesturing at empty air, reaching for things that weren't there. He stopped again at the rail, but this time he bent lower, as if listening to voices rising from the depths. Owen's fingers trembled as he turned back through the journal's earlier pages. The paper felt different here, crisper, less worn. His gaze caught on an entry marked 15 years past. The ink faded to brown. Storm came from nowhere. Waves tall as church steeples. Lightning split the sky into shards. Lawrence's normally precise handwriting sprawled across the page in jagged strokes. Lost the mainmast first, then the mizzen. Water poured in faster than we could bail. Owen pressed closer to the lamp. The next lines were smudged, as if water had spattered the page, while Lawrence wrote, Made the call. God help me, I made the call. Cut loose the longboat. Room for 8. Had 23 souls aboard. Picked the married men first, the ones with children. The words blurred as Owen blinked back tears. He could picture it. Lawrence in another captain's uniform, younger but still straight-backed, watching as the sea tore his ship apart. Their screams still ring in my ears. 15 good men left behind. The waves took them one by one. Thompson reached for my hand. I saw his eyes when the water pulled him under. Never saw such betrayal. Owen's stomach churned. The next paragraph was written in a different ink, added later. Found driftwood 3 days later. Recognized Jenkins' coat buttons. No body. Sea kept them all. Their faces in every wave now. The sea demands payment for my cowardice. A line had been drawn across the page, separating the account from a final note. I dream of them, swimming in the deep, following my new ship, waiting. The sea never forgets her debts. One day she'll collect. Owen closed the journal with shaking hands. Above, Lawrence's boots scraped against the deck, that same endless pacing. But now Owen understood. The captain wasn't just seeing things in the waves, he was seeing them. The men he'd left behind. Owen's fingers fumbled with the charts as boots thundered down the companionway. He shoved the journal beneath the stack, smoothing the papers with trembling hands. His heart hammered so loud he feared Lawrence would hear it. The cabin door creaked open. Owen bent over a map of the Atlantic, trying to steady his breathing. The smell hit him first. Salt and sweat and something else. Something wrong, like rotting seaweed left too long in the sun. Lawrence's shadow fell across the table. Owen forced himself not to look up, focusing on the careful lines of latitude and longitude. But he couldn't help seeing the captain's white-knuckled grip on the doorframe, the way his fingers twitched against the wood. Find anything interesting in those charts, boy? Owen swallowed hard. Lawrence's voice had changed these past weeks, rougher, as if he'd been gargling with sand. The captain's eyes darted around the cabin, never settling in one place. They looked different too, bloodshot and wild, the warm brown Owen remembered now clouded like murky water. Just studying the trade routes, Uncle David. Owen hated how his voice shook. Like you showed me. Lawrence's boots scraped against the floorboards as he stepped closer. Water dripped from his coat sleeve onto the map, though Owen hadn't seen rain for days. The drops spread across the paper like tiny ink blots, distorting the carefully drawn coastlines. Good lad, always learning. Lawrence's hands trembled as he braced them against the table. But there are things these charts don't show. Things in the deep. Beautiful things. Terrible things. Owen's skin crawled as Lawrence leaned closer. The captain's breath smelled of brine and decay. Owen's hands shook as he assembled bread and dried meat on a tin plate. The galley's familiar smells of salt pork and hardtack did nothing to calm his nerves. Every creak of timber made him jump, expecting Lawrence's heavy tread on the stairs. A shadow fell across the doorway. Owen's heart stopped. What are you doing down here? Lawrence's voice cracked like a whip. Owen spun around, nearly dropping the plate. Making your dinner, Uncle. Don't call me that. Lawrence's face twisted. Sweat gleamed on his forehead despite the evening chill. He gripped a belaying pin in his right hand, knuckles white against the worn wood. You're one of them. Been watching me. Plotting. No, I swear. Owen backed away until his hips struck the table. Lawrence advanced, the pin raised. The way you whisper with Hamilton. Think I don't see. Think I don't know what's coming. Owen's back hit the bulkhead. Nowhere left to run. Please, Owen whispered. You're not well. Ship! Ho! A voice shouted. Lawrence froze, pin still raised. A ship's bell rang across the water, clear and bright in the gathering dusk. Lawrence's fingers loosened their grip on Owen's collar. The captain's eyes cleared for a moment, focusing on something beyond the galley walls. The bell rang again, closer now. Owen felt Lawrence's hand tremble against his chest. Owen huddled deeper into the wool blanket, its rough fibers scratching his neck. The wardroom's polished brass and neat stacks of charts felt alien, after weeks in the Greywake's chaos. Captain Howell perched behind his desk, ramrod straight in his blue uniform, while Lawrence slumped between two red-coated Marines. "Start from the beginning," Howell said, dipping his pen. Owen's throat tightened. The changes came after Barbados. "Lies!" Lawrence lunged forward, chains rattling. "Tell him about the things in the water! The voices!" "Be silent," Howell snapped. "Continue, boy." He stopped sleeping, said the crew plotted against him. Owen's voice cracked. "Then Daniels vanished. We found blood. They took him." Lawrence's eyes blazed. Dark shapes under the waves, waiting, always waiting. Spittle flew from his lips. "The boy saw them too. Tell him, Owen." The Marines tightened their grip as Lawrence thrashed. Owen pressed back into his chair, stomach churning at the sight of his once steady mentor reduced to this wild-eyed stranger. "There were no shapes," Owen whispered. "You did something to Daniels. They all said you did." "Ungrateful wretch!" Lawrence's chains clinked as he pointed a trembling finger. "After I protected you from them. They're in every port, you know. In the taverns, the warehouses, wearing human skin." "Remove him!" Howell ordered. The Marines dragged Lawrence toward the door. He fought them, boots scraping the wooden deck. "No one else will believe you." Lawrence's voice rose to a shriek. "They're everywhere, in every port, waiting." The door slammed shut, muffling his continued ravings. Owen stared at his hands, vision blurring with tears. Owen gripped the polished rail of the Steadfast, his knuckles white against the dark wood. The longboat cut through choppy waves, six backs bent to the oars as they approached the Greywake. The familiar vessel looked wrong now, a twisted shadow of the home he'd known. Even the carved figurehead seemed to sneer in the fading light. Salt spray stung his eyes. At least, that's what he told himself as he wiped his face with a trembling hand. The gentle weight of Captain Howell's palm settled on his shoulder. "You did well, lad. We'll see you safe to port, and we'll take care of Hamilton too." Owen managed a nod, his throat too tight for words. His gaze locked onto the dark windows of the captain's cabin. There, a flash of movement behind the glass. A pale oval that might have been a face. Lawrence's face. The longboat bumped against the Greywake's hull. Naval sailors swarmed up the side like practiced monkeys, their weapons glinting. Owen's chest squeezed tight. He remembered other men climbing those same ropes, their faces determined in the dark. Remembered the screams that followed. A gust of wind carried fragments of voices across the water. Orders being shouted, boots thundering on deck, the sharp crack of a door being forced. But Owen couldn't look away from that cabin window. The shape was still there, watching, waiting. Even after everything, some part of him wanted to run back, to help the man who'd been like an uncle to him, the man who'd taught him to tie knots and read charts under Caribbean stars. But that man was gone, replaced by something else. Something that had spilled blood across the Greywake's weathered boards and filled the hold with screams. The face in the window didn't move, just watched and smiled. Owen pressed the worn leather journal against his ribs, each breath fogging in the grey morning air. The Greywake's bow creaked beneath his feet, her timbers groaning like a wounded beast. Blood had soaked deep into the planks. No amount of scrubbing would ever wash it clean. Men in blue coats swarmed across the deck, boots thundering on wood. Their brass buttons caught the weak dawn light. Owen tracked their movements through hollow eyes, noting how they stepped around the dark stains, how their faces changed when they found Lloyd's broken pocket watch near the mainmast. "Boy." A port official approached, his ledger clutched tight. "We need to know what happened here." Owen's fingers dug deeper into the journal's cover. The pages crackled, filled with Lawrence's desperate scrawls, his descent into madness mapped in ink and blood. "Check the forward hold first." Owen's voice came out rough. "That's where—" He swallowed hard. "That's where most of them are." The official's face paled. He waved two constables over, pointing them toward the hatch. Their lanterns cast dancing shadows as they descended. A shout echoed up from below. More men rushed forward, disappearing into the darkness. Owen could picture what they'd found: the rope coils sticky with dried blood, scattered tools that had become weapons in desperate hands. "Sir!" A young officer burst from the captain's cabin. "You need to see this." Owen knew what they'd discovered. The walls covered in Lawrence's frantic writings, star charts defaced with strange symbols, the maps where he'd marked the places he claimed they waited, lurking beneath the waves. The morning fog curled around the grey wake's ravaged hull like grasping fingers. Somewhere in the harbour, a bell tolled, deep and hollow, like the sound of waves against a dead ship's bones. Owen watched from behind a stack of crates as they led Lawrence down the gangplank. The captain's wrists were bound in iron, his proud bearing broken. Two naval officers gripped his arms while he stumbled between them, his boots dragging across the weathered boards. "The depths know," Lawrence's hoarse voice carried across the water. "They remember what was promised." Captain Howell descended after them, his naval uniform pristine against the grey harbour mist. The man's face was granite, unmoved by the pitiful sight before him. Lawrence's head snapped up, his red hair wild and plastered to his skull. His eyes found Owen's hiding spot with uncanny precision. "Boy, tell them about the voices, the ones that called from below." Owen shrank deeper into the shadows. His hands trembled as he gripped the rough wood of the crates. "The old debts must be paid," Lawrence thrashed against his captors. "They're coming to collect." A naval officer stepped forward to restrain him, but Lawrence's head whipped back, cracking against the man's nose. Blood sprayed. Lawrence broke free, lunging toward Owen's position with manacled hands outstretched. 3 more officers tackled him to the dock. Lawrence went rigid, eyes rolling back until only whites showed. His mouth worked silently, foam gathering at the corners. A physician hurried forward, his black bag swinging. He knelt beside Lawrence's prone form, pressing fingers to throat and wrist. After a moment, he stood and conferred quietly with Captain Howell. "Get him to the infirmary," the physician announced. "He's in no state for questioning." They lifted Lawrence's limp body. As they carried him past, his eyes snapped open, fixing on Owen once more. His lips moved, forming words Owen couldn't hear, but he could read them clearly enough. "They're waiting!" Heavy footsteps pounded across the gangplank. Owen recognized his father's uneven gait before he saw him, that slight drag of the left foot from an old mining accident. "Owen!" His father's arms wrapped around him, wool coat scratching Owen's cheek. The familiar scent of pipe tobacco and coal dust filled his nose, but Owen's arms hung limp at his sides. The journal pressed between them like a shield. "Thank God you're safe, my boy," his father's voice cracked. "When we heard about the troubles aboard..." A naval officer approached, boots clicking on the deck. "The journal, lad. We'll need it for evidence." Owen's fingers dug into the leather, his heart hammered against his ribs. "It's mine, sir. My personal diary of the voyage." The officer frowned, reaching for the book. "All ship's documents must be..." "My son's private writings aren't naval property." His father's arm tightened around Owen's shoulders. The familiar protective steel entered his voice, the same tone he used with mine foremen who pushed too hard. Owen pressed closer to his father's side, clutching the journal. The officer's eyes narrowed, studying Owen's face. "Let the boy keep his diary." Captain Howell's voice cut through the tension. He stood at the rail, hands clasped behind his back. "We have enough evidence without it." The officer withdrew with a curt nod. Owen's father guided him toward the gangplank, but Owen resisted. He turned for one last look at the grey wake. Morning fog still clung to her rigging. The tide pulled at her hull, making the ropes creak like distant screams. Dark stains marked the deck where Owen squeezed his eyes shut, but the images burned behind his eyelids. "Come on, son." His father's gentle touch drew him away. "Let's get you home." The salt spray felt different now. Owen traced the familiar scars on his palm, thin white lines where rope had burned flesh during those dark days at sea. 15 years hadn't dulled the memories, but they'd taught him to carry them differently. Waves crashed against the rocky Welsh coast, sending plumes of white foam skyward. The morning fog had lifted, leaving behind a pearl-grey sky that reminded him too much of the grey wake's weathered sails. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel behind him. Owen didn't need to turn. He recognized his father's gait, slower now with age, but still marked by that telltale drag of the left foot. "The carriage is ready." His father's voice had grown softer over the years, gentled by time and worry. "Dr. Phillips says he's having one of his lucid days." Owen nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon where sea met sky. "Do you think he'll know who we are this time?" Owen's voice caught on the words. Visits could be difficult. There were long stretches of time where Lawrence was calm, cooperative and pleasant, but then others when he was in a state of violent derangement, with the orderlies forced to sedate him. The memory of his uncle's wild eyes and foam-flecked lips made Owen's stomach clench. Not his uncle, not really, just Captain Lawrence now. But Owen still hoped. Hoped that the man who had once taught him to navigate by stars would somehow be restored, not lost somewhere in the vast darkness of his own mind. His father's hand settled on his shoulder, warm and steady. The touch anchored Owen to the present, keeping the tide of memories at bay. "We'll see," his father squeezed gently. "But either way, you're not alone. Hope you enjoyed our story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the void."